Hey guys, in today's lecture we'll be dealing with semiotics. Now, semiology is described as a systematic study of science. Now, the beginning of semiology is marked around the end of 19th century, and it was the American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce who used this term for the first time to describe his field of study or to describe his field of work. So, it is a systematic study of science. സയൻസിന്റെ പഠനമാണ് സെമിയോട്ടിക്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സെമിയോളജി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ബട്ട് ദി ആക്ച്വൽ ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ഓഫ് റെക്കഗ്നൈസിംഗ് ദ സ്കോപ്പ് ഓഫ് സെമിയോട്ടിക്സ് is attributed to Ferdinand de Saussure. So it was Saussure who developed the concept of semiotics, you can see. His lectures form the basis of modern literary theory and modern literary study. And he conducted a series of lectures, and he used to give a series of lectures to his students in the year 1915 under the title A Course on General Linguistics. And it was in this course on general linguistics that he proposed the study known as semiology. So it was in his work, The Course on General Linguistics, that Ferdinand de Saussure proposed the study known as semiology. Now, let's take a look at what C.S. Peirce meant by the term semiotics. And now C.S. Peirce, the American philosopher, came up with 3 classes of science. So when talking about science, or when explaining about science, C.S. Peirce came up with 3 classes of science. And he defined science on the basis of the kind of relation that exists between a signifying item and what it signifies. Usually a sign signifies something, right? എന്തൊരു സൈനും ഏതൊരു സൈനും എന്തിനെങ്കിലും സിഗ്നിഫൈ ചെയ്യുന്നതായിരിക്കും. So C.S. Peirce classified science on the basis of the kind of relation that exists between the sign and the signifying item and what it signifies. So the signifying item and what it signifies has come by kind of relation, and he defined science on the basis of this relation. Now there are 3 kinds of science, which are icon, index and symbol. Now let's take a detailed look at it, then you will understand what it is all about. Now an icon functions as a sign by means of its inherent similarities. When you are talking about an icon, now icon is a sign, and there is a relation between the signifying item and what it signifies, and the relation between the signifying item and what it signifies is direct. So an icon functions as a sign by the means of its inherent similarities. അതായത് ആ ഒരു സൈനിൽ തന്നെ there will be some kind of an inherent similarity between the signifying item and what it signifies. For example, this is a portrait picture of Robert Downey Jr. So this is a picture. This is an image. This is a portrait picture of Robert Downey Jr. And after seeing this picture, you immediately recognize this as the actor Robert Downey Jr. Right. So it is an inherent similarity. So there is an inherent similarity between the picture of Robert Downey Jr. and the person it signifies. That is Robert Downey Jr. Both are the same. So there is an inherent similarity between these two, the signifying item and as well as the what it signifies, that is Robert Downey Jr. Now a similar case is there with maps. Now maps represent the different places in the world, right? So in the map you will be able to represent a geographical area. So map stands for the geographical area which stands for it. So there is a similarity between a map and the geographical area that stands for it. The cartographers, they take aerial photographs of places and then finally they draw a map. That's how maps are being drawn. And this map in a way represents the geographical area. The map that you see in front of you, it is a visual representation of the actual geographical area. So it stands for an actual geographical area. So a map stands for an actual geographical area. and there is a similarity between the map and the actual geographical area, similar to the similarity between this portrait and the actual person, Robert Downey Jr. So an icon functions as a sign by the means of the inherent similarities or shared features with what it signifies. So this picture has some shared features with Robert Downey Jr. Similar to that, this map also has some shared features with the geographical location. For example, when you see this here in this map, here is India, you can say that India is a peninsula. It is covered by water on all the three sides, and that on the right you have the Bay of Bengal, and on the left of India you have the Arabian Sea, etc. So when you say that, you will be able to distinctly mark the geographical location of India on a map, and the map serves for the geographical location as well. So there is a shared feature, that is a shared feature between the map as well as the geographical location. Moving on, now the second classification that Peirce made was that of index. Now, a sign which bears a natural relation of cause or effect to what it signifies is called an index. A sign which bears a natural relation or cause or effect of what it signifies is called an index. For example, when you see some smoke, you immediately know that there has been a fire. So a smoke indicates a fire. So there is a natural relation between the smoke as well as the fire. എവിടെയെങ്കിലും കുറച്ച് പുക കണ്ടു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അവിടെ എന്താണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അവിടെ തീയുണ്ട് എന്ന് അറിയാൻ പറ്റും. So it denotes that the smoke indicates fire. So there is a natural relation, a cause and an effect. Wherever there is a smoke, there is a fire. So there is also a cause and effect, and there is also a natural relation between the sign and what it signifies. So the sign might be smoke. Smoke does not have an inherent relation with fire. Smoke and fire are different entities. But wherever there is a smoke, there is a fire. So there is a natural relation or a cause or effect between what it signifies. So a sign which bears a natural relation of cause or effect to what it signifies is called an index. So if there is a smoke, then there is a fire. Now, a pointing weather vane also indicates the direction of wind. Now, sometimes it goes like this. There will be a weather vane which is placed somewhere. Now, a weather vane is shown in this picture, and this weather vane indicates the direction of wind. So, when the wind passes, the weather vane indicates the direction of wind, whether it is in the northeast direction, whether it is in the southwest direction. The weather vane indicates the direction of wind. A pointing weather vane always indicates the direction of wind. So there is no inherent similarity between a weather vane and wind, but a pointing weather vane is an indication of the direction of wind. Wind ഏത് ദിശയിൽ പോയി എന്ന് നമുക്കൊരു weather vane നെ നോക്കി പറയാൻ പറ്റും. So there is a natural relation between the sign and what it signifies. So here, when the wind passes, the weather vane points to a particular direction, and there is a cause as well as an effect. When the wind causes the weather vane to change its direction, and thereby you are able to understand in what direction the wind moves. So there is a direct cause and effect between the sign, which is the weather vane, and what it signifies, the direction of wind. Moving on to the third type of sign in Peircean typology, which is the relation between the signifying item and what it signifies is not a natural one in the case of a symbol. So the third type of sign or the classification of sign is that of a symbol. Now, in the case of symbol, there is no natural relationship between what is being signifying and what is signified. So the relation between the signifying item and what it signifies is not a natural one when it comes to symbol, but it is entirely an amount of convention. For example, let's suppose you shake hands with people. Now shaking hands is a symbol. In some countries, in some cultures, shaking hands denotes that you are meeting a person for the first time or you are parting with a person for the first time. So it is entirely based on convention. Whenever you shake hands with a person, it is entirely based on convention. Whether you are meeting the person for the first time or whether you are parting with him, you always shake hands. Similar to that, when there is a red light in the traffic signal, then it denotes that you need to stop, right? So there is no natural one-on-one relation between the red light and stop, but it is put there by convention. Now, as I said before, in the case of shaking hands, now if you go to Japan, they might not shake hands, but they might bow their head. So for them, the convention is different. Similarly, when you go to some other place, in most places, red indicates that you need to stop. But in some other places, there might be some other symbol to indicate that you need to stop. So it is again a convention which we gave to that sign. So it becomes a symbol. It is by convention that we stop at the red light or we slow down at the orange light. Now, the greatest example of a symbol is the words that constitutes a language. Now, there is no natural relationship between a word and what it indicates. For example, an apple, A-P-P-L-E, apple, the word has no natural relation with the object apple. If you go to some other place, apple might be called by another name, right? So there is no natural relation between the signifying item, which is the apple, and the signifying item, which is the words apple, and what it signifies, which is the actual apple. There is no relation between, there is no natural relation between the word barbecue and what it signifies. The well roasted meat. And there is no one-on-one natural relationship between the word myopic and what it signifies, short-sightedness. It is put there by convention. We invented certain words to denote certain meanings, or we invented certain gestures to denote certain meanings. So it is there purely based on convention. It is entirely a matter of social convention. The relation between the signifying item and what it signifies is purely a matter of convention. So those were the three types of classes of signs according to C.S. Peirce. Now let's take a look at Saussure's concept of sign, signifier and signified. Now, in his paper, Nature of Linguistics, Saussure defined the basic components of language as sign, signifier and signified. Now, sign is a product of the union between the signifier and the signified. Signified is the concept of idea conveyed, and a signifier is essentially language, a set of speech sounds or marks made on a page. Now, according to Saussure, a sign is a product of the union between a signifier and a signified. So, a signifier and signified combine together to form sign. That's what Saussure said. Now, the signified is the concept of the idea conveyed, and the signifier is essentially language, a set of speech sounds or marks made on a page. Now, let's take a look at it. So, when you think about a tree, then that is a concept that is there on your mind, right? When you think about a tree, then that is a concept which is there on your mind. So, it is a signified. Okay, the mental image that is there is the signified. But when you think about a tree and when you utter it, tree, using the phonemes th, r and e, it becomes a sound image, right? Tree, it is a signifier. The sound tree indicates this concept of a tree. Now, when you write it on a piece of paper using grapheme, using script, if you use English, then it is like this. You write T-R-E-E. It again indicates the concept of a tree, the mental image of a tree. And if a person draws the picture of a tree, then that also indicates the mental image of a tree. So a tree can be represented using sounds, it can be represented using graphemes or marks made on a page, or it can be represented by using a picture of a tree, by drawing a picture of a tree. So you may use speech sounds t, r and e to indicate the signified, the tree, the concept of a tree. You may write T-R-E-E to indicate the concept of a tree, or you may just draw the picture or an image of a tree to indicate the concept of a tree. So these representations are all known as sound images of a tree. These are all used to signify the concept known as the signifier. So these are all used to signify the concept, hence they are known as signifiers. They are all used to denote the concept of a tree, which is here being signified. Now the signifier as well as the signified together combine to form a sign. So, for instance, when we use the word tree either in reading, speaking or writing, it brings up the concept of a tree. So, whenever we write tree, T-R-E-E, in a piece of paper, or when we draw the image of a tree, or when we speak tree, it immediately conjures up the image of a tree, right? So, both signifier and signified together form the sign. Together becomes the sign. That's what Saussure said in his lectures. Now, one of the key characteristic feature of a sign is that sign is arbitrary in nature. What do you mean by arbitrary in nature? There is no natural connection between the signifier and the signified. There is no natural connection between the signifier as well as the signified. For example, the sequence of words A-P-P-L-E has no natural connection with the real apple. Now this is evident because there are different languages, right? So in English, A-P-P-L-E may denote an apple, but when it comes to French, it is pomme. So if there was a natural one-on-one relation between apple and the real apple, then everywhere in the world apple will be called by the name apple, but that's not the case. In France, it is known as a pomme. So there is no one-on-one natural connection between the signifier and the signified. So it is arbitrary in nature, which means that this is not fixed by law. These the signifier and signified depends upon the relation between the signifier and signified depends upon the arbitrary nature, which means that it is based on the individual preferences. Now you may call this apple, a man from France may call it pomme. Now you might be wondering, there are many words in English, right? Onomatopoeic words, and these onomatopoeic words may stand for these words, right? Onomatopoeic words have some intrinsic relation between the signifier as well as what it signifies, right? So when a dog barks, then it produces the sound bow bow. So there is a natural relation between the sound as well as what it signifies, right? The bark of a dog, but that's not the case. Again, it may change. Sometimes an onomatopoeic word can be considered as an exception. For example, TikTok and the like, or the buzz of the buzzing sound of the bee, the buzz, it is same in almost all languages, but sometimes it might change. For example, in English, when a dog barks, usually we indicate it as bow bow, but in French it becomes awa wa. So again, there is a difference when it comes to onomatopoeia. And sometimes you might say, what about interjunctions? Interjunctions are again produced when you feel pain or when you get hit or something, you immediately produce a word, right? But again, there is a difference. For example, when you get hit, you will say ayu in Malayalam. Sometimes you might say ouch. A person in France might say I. So interjunctions can again change. Interjunctions, though onomatopoeic words and interjunctions are natural expressions, again they are subject to change. Again, these are arbitrary in nature. That's what Ferdinand de Saussure argued. Moving on to the second concept of sign, Ferdinand de Saussure focused on the linear nature of sign. Now he said that a signifier is auditory. Usually a signifier is a sound image, so it is auditory. So it is unfolded in time, from which it gets the following characteristics. Usually a signifier represents a span. Now a span is usually measurable in a single dimension. Auditory signifiers have at their command only the dimension of time. Now the elements are presented in succession and they form a chain. For example, these are all talking about auditory signifiers. So when you say apple, it is a combination of A-P-P-L-E, and it takes a time to utter the word apple. Or when you write it, again A-P-P-L-E, the image so slowly unfolds on your mind. So it has represents a span. Auditory images often represent a span, and it is measurable only in a single dimension. It is linear. When you write A-P-P-L-E, it is linear, and at a time only one image comes into your mind. When you utter apple, it takes some time to register, and it represents a span, and at a time only one image comes to your mind. So it is linear. So auditory signifiers have at their command only one dimension of time. Now the elements of auditory signifiers are presented in succession, one after the other. The elements are presented in succession. A, P, P, L, E. So all these words are come together, and together over the time it slowly unfolds its meaning. Each and every word slowly unfolds its meaning over a span of time. In repeated succession, it forms a chain. In writing, the spatial line of graphic marks is substituted for succession in time. So when you speak, it takes some time for the symbol to get registered, for the sign to get registered. But when in writing also, when you write each and every grapheme, each and every spatial line substitutes a succession of time. Slowly you write the word by using the alphabets A, P, P, L, E. So it is linear. When you write, you think about only just one object. Soon after writing, it takes some span of time, and soon after writing, you think about only one object, and that is the object that is being signified. So when you are writing A, P, P, L, E, it denotes apple and nothing else. And when you speak, again, when you are using auditory signifier, again it is linear. When you say apple, it is again linear. It takes a span of time to register. It takes a span of time, and it is produced in a succession, in a chain, and it indicates an apple or a signified. So this is known as the linear nature of sign. Another concept that we can use to explain it further is that if you are given the image of an apple, immediately many things may conjure up on your mind. If it is an image, then it indicates many other things. For example, an apple may indicate a fruit, it may indicate freshness, it may indicate apple in the eye. But when you are writing or when you are speaking about apple, it slowly unfolds in time. It is linear in nature. There the sign is linear in nature. In writing as well as in speech, sign is linear in nature. With that, we come to an end of this lecture. Thank you for listening. Take care.